Umkhonto weSizwe Chief Whip Mzwanele Manyi joins us now to get his reaction to the reaction from Afriforum. Mr. Manyi, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Perhaps you want to share your thoughts on the statement from Afriforum where they say you, the MK party, are making them a scapegoat. What do you say to that?
Yeah, look, good evening to you, Naledi, and viewership. Yeah, indeed, just to recap that later this morning, went to lay charges at the Cape Town police station against the Afriforum for their reckless behavior, which actually amounts to treason, because what they have done with their reckless lies, they have given the impression to other administrations, to a foreign power out there, to say that South Africa is doing all kinds of things. Trump was tweeting that South Africa is doing bad things, taking land from people and all of that, all because of the lies of the Afriforum. So we have a situation here where the authority and sovereignty of South Africa has been undermined as a result of all the lies that the Afriforum has been peddling. They've been saying their land is being confiscated without compensation, a pure lie, and all that, and they are being killed. There's a whole lot of lies.
Yeah. You want to talk to me about perhaps, and I think you're frozen, so I hope your line is still all right, Mr. Manyi. Talk to me about the ideal outcome here, and also as you speak as a party to your legal representatives, you know, the likelihood of success. Okay, that line giving us some trouble. What a pity. As we continue to get reaction, of course, to the MK party, really hoping to get that line back. But yeah, unfortunately, the technology gremlins getting the better of us this evening. But remember, you're more than welcome to give us a call, 010-594-6010, or send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584. The MK party today putting forward those charges against Afriforum for treason. This is as a result of Afriforum lobbying in the U.S. to U.S. President Donald Trump over the Expropriation Act and other issues as well that have been raised, where you've heard Donald Trump talking about land grabs taking place in South Africa. But the issue of misinformation coming up a lot lately. But we have, of course, heard from the MK party a little bit earlier on in the day as they laid those charges. Let's continue now to expand on the conversation. The Black Forum of South Africa CEO Advocate Kgagudi Morota joins us in studio. We're also joined by the Institute of Race Relations Executive Director, Gabriel Crouse, and legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikalala joining us via video link. But let's start here in studio. Advocate Morota, thank you so much for your time. You have put forward a statement as the Black Forum of South Africa saying that Afriforum should be charged for treason.
Yes, thanks very much, Naleji, and greetings to the viewers at home. Yeah, we emphasize it is Black Forum's positionality that Afriforum must be charged for the crime, for committing crime of treason, because what they have done qualifies to be a crime of treason. You will remember that there are certain acts which, if a person can do, will qualify as a crime of treason, and Afriforum has done one of them. First one is overthrowing of the state. The second one could be coercing a government in a violent manner to act or not to act on a particular issues. The third one is constitutional, pushing for the constitutional change, or changing the constitutional structure of a particular country. But the one which we feel like is more relevant to the Afriforum is the threatening the independence of the state by, you know, going to America, powerful foreign nation, to lie and command them to, you know, intimidate, threatens the Republic of South Africa, so that from now going forward, we'll be scared to pass legislations in the country which are, you know, addressing the past imbalances of the past, because we'll be scared of the powerful foreign nations like America. Therefore, their act qualifies on threatening us to lose our independence as a country, as a state, at the current moment.
Okay. Well, we're gonna get into that, because obviously we need to look at the laws that are in place and where there is space for what it is that you're talking about. But let's get more reaction. We're also joined by Gabriel Crouse of the Institute for Race Relations. Gabriel, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. You know, just as you react as well to, you know, the steps that have been taken by the MK party, if you think it's a step in the right direction, I'm also keen to hear what you think this entire debate around expropriation and then into Afriforum and then funding cuts from the US, what this does for race relations in South Africa, what you've observed about how we're speaking to each other across racial lines.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Let me just say I'm the Executive Director of IRR Legal and a fellow of the IRR.
Sure.
Small thing. So let me start by saying that this conversation has not been good for race relations. And I think that some blame has to go to the South African government and some blame has to go to the US government. We warned for years that passing legislation or attempting to amend the constitution to allow for expropriation at nil compensation is going to inflame racial tensions. It's not, in our opinion, an effective way to accelerate land reform. We believe land reform must be accelerated. It's crazy if you look at the budget and how it's been cut to help out poor black victims of dispossession under apartheid and the colonial predecessors of that. And you know, we encourage proper land reform. Doing it through nil compensation is a revanchist technique that drives up racial tensions. But America's added fuel to the fire by singling out Afrikaners as the sole or main victims of South Africa's bad policy. And I think, as your previous correspondent was saying, there's a misimpression created by the US that land has already been confiscated. That's not true. What is true is that a lot of land has been invaded, a lot of it government land, and a lot of the land that's been invaded belongs to black people. I have personally interviewed several black landowners who have lost their land because the police couldn't help them protect themselves from invasive neighbors. So, you know, our general point is that when the South African government lets us down as citizens, it's letting down black people, it's letting down white people, Indian people, colored people. And the US shouldn't try and single out one particular group for special preference. It should, if it wants to try and exert pressure, it should try and help us all. In terms of the MK's response to Afriforum, you know, treason is a common law offense. Your previous guest mentioned some of the different forms of that offense. The form that they're interested in is the one that is the least likely to get anywhere in court, because we also have strong free speech protection under the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. People are allowed to say things, they're allowed to say their opinions. And I think in order to cross the threshold into treason, those opinions have to what is said has to go beyond just opinionating. And I haven't seen any evidence given that there's been anything more than opinionating.
Yeah. Let's bring in Mr. Mpumelelo Zikalala, of course, a legal expert, also joining us. And Gabriel, because you are with IRR Legal, we're going to tap more into that legal side as well a little bit later. But Mr. Zikalala, give us the bird's eye view here as well from where you see it. The likelihood of treason charges coming to muster as being pursued by the MK party.
Good evening to my fellow panelists. Well, there's very little prospect of success that can be there. Remember that once you go through the criminal law, especially if you're going to use common law as one of the transgressions that have taken place, you have to pass a very high muster if you want to say, I want to find, or the judge is going to find this person guilty of this particular act. The first one is going to be, but for your conduct, but for your unlawful conduct act, this is the situation that we find ourselves into. Now, if you come back to high treason, those four pillars will then have to be satisfied. And if you look at how things have planned out in this situation, yes, there might have been threats, yes, there might have been certain instances towards that, but none of them have materialized to where the South African government is going to come back to say we are threatened or there's any shake-up that has taken place. If you look at it, you still have the judiciary, you still have the legislature, you still have the president of the executive, you still have the legislation that has been passed. Nothing has moved it away from the process to where it is right now. Nothing is moving any government official from being able to exercise all those particular powers. If you look at the response of the US government, it was not to say we are sending troops tomorrow or the very next morning, this is what's going to happen. They simply said, we've seen what is happening, stated it in their own media platforms, and said, if you want to come and stay with us, you are more than welcome to do so. So if you look at all these particular acts grouped together and you ask yourself this one important question, has it been done in a manner which is going to threaten the independence of the state? Has it been done in a manner in which it threatens the security of the state? The answer to that would be no, unless if there's any other information that is going to be found out when they go into proper investigation through law enforcement agencies and also the NPA. What should be done, though, or what is this signifying, is a missing piece in our legislation that says, in instances in which some false information is going to be passed over to foreign countries, to foreign authorities, what reprieve and what things we can fall back on as South Africans to say, do not engage in this type of things because they may not have materialized in something now, but at a later stage they may as well do. So that August 2023 type of legislation that needed to be there, which was not developed by a parliament, maybe it's high time in which the legislature must sit down and say, how are we going to protect South Africans, both economically and legislatively, so that whenever someone goes outside of the country, spreads false news about the current situation of the country, which then undermines the very system of democracy, there are certain reprieves or certain things that you can be able to fall back on.
Sure, that's interesting. Mr. Manyi, thanks for joining the panel. We lost him a little bit early and he's agreed to join the panel, so we appreciate that. You hear Mpumelelo Zikalala saying the prospects of success on the action taken by the MK party not looking very good and green for you, but I'm keen to hear if that matters, right? If the end goal is as important as the process, I think.
No, I think the problem with the analysis given by both these legal experts is that it's very thin. They've just taken one thing and they've just tried to summarize everything into one line. I just want to refer them to the Rioters Assemblies Act, Act number 17 of 1956. If you look at that, they mention three categories of what would constitute treason. The first one is attempting to overthrow the government by force or by violence. That's not the one. And they seem to think that is the case because they keep talking about everything is still intact. That's not the line. The other one is assisting any enemy at war with the Republic of South Africa. That's not the one. Again, it talks about those kinds of issues here. The one that we're dealing with here, which is in the law, is one that says instigating foreign intervention in internal affairs with intentions to harm the state. Now, here, that's the category that we're dealing with. We have a situation where the state, as we speak here and now, is being harmed by the result, by the actions of the Afriforum. So the Afriforum has done what it has done. Trump has now responded. The country is being harmed. He's cutting foreign aid. He's cutting his aid. He's coming up with all kinds of sanctions against South Africa. That is harming the state. Not only that, they've actually even undermined the authority of the state. So now we're sitting here with South Africa that cannot make its own laws because when they make this law, it's characterized as some barbaric law and what have you. And also what is also going to harm the state is that if South Africa now is a country where people have to run away from, which investor is going to come to South Africa? So all of that, if you add them together, they amount to harming the state, and it's in the law. And indeed, it's in the Rioters Act. But even if you look at common law itself, you look at the various case studies, case laws that have ensued, there is no argument in terms of the legal framework of these things that I've just mentioned here. So there is a plethora of this. So we're very clear that it is actually quite a very strong case. And as I say, what makes it strong is that this is not some pontification. This is not some freedom of speech. This is something that has been said, and as a result of it being said, the country has been empirically undermined. To say that you're not going to give aid, you can quantify that. To say that you're going to impose these kinds of sanctions, you can quantify that. To say that people must come to your country, you have characterized South Africa as a violent country. You have characterized South Africa as a country that does not respect democracy. So all of those things are actually harmful to the country, and that is enough to constitute the act of treason.
Sure.
The sovereignty of the country has been undermined, the authority has been undermined, so Afriforum must pay for this.
Well, we're gonna take calls as well. 010-594-6010. Rashid is calling in from Johannesburg. Rashid, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Thank you so much for calling. What are your thoughts?
Well, not as extensive as the previous caller, but just briefly, I think the issue, when one looks at the root cause of it, during the CODESA negotiations, when the original first election took place, I think the ANC had the opportunity then to negotiate and to finalize the issue of black farming as opposed to what actually happened, and then coming up with little reforms where they purchased land as time went on and no infrastructure was supplied. And of course, these farms, many of them then failed. Now, this should have been done initially because, as you know, liberation without land is meaningless. It could have happened then.
Yeah,
My view on the Afriforum thing is I'm fully in support of them being sanctioned because they've now caused immense harm based on an untruth. No farms have been appropriated from white farmers, and they went and represented the dishonest opinions to the American administration.
Yeah.
And now we have a situation where they've applied the sanction, and that is going to have some bad consequences as time moves on.
Yeah. Okay, Rashid.
I think even individuals such as Gary Player need to be addressed. It's fine if you're critical, but for a person who once represented this country as an ambassador in the old regime, to also stand with those who want to harm the country economically, that's not on. That's unacceptable.
Okay, Rashid, thank you so much for calling. We're going to get so many more views, I can tell. So let's open up the line, 010-594-6010. And really the focus of our discussion this evening is the mission that has been embarked on now by the MK party in support as well is the Black Forum of South Africa and other bodies that have said charges of treason must be laid against Afriforum. Let us know what you think. Send us a WhatsApp on 0721105584. We continue on the other side of this. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition. We continue with our panel discussion, and we look at reactions to the MK party having opened those charges or laid those charges against Afriforum for treason in Cape Town. And we continue with our panel, taking your call, 010-594-6010. But let's see the WhatsApps that have come in this evening so far. Anonymous in Cape Town says the sad part about this whole debate is that we're dealing with a government that is so detached from lived experiences of the citizens. That is why this government can sign these bills, could jeopardize the people's lives. As for Afriforum being charged with treason, we all know that will never happen. Anonymous, thanks for sending in that WhatsApp. Let's see what else has come in. Kwadi says Afriforum be charged by who and for what exactly? Are they not exercising their constitutional right by seeking foreign intervention as far as this act in question is concerned? Okay, Kwadi, so thanks for those questions. And Sam Woodley says Afriforum is 100% responsible for potential civil unrest in South Africa. The world will see the lies of Afriforum when Afrikaners don't accept the refugee offer from the United States. Thank you so much for those WhatsApps. We've got a caller on the line. Mpho is in Randfontein. Mpho, good evening.
Good evening, and good evening to your panel.
Thank you for calling. Talk to us, Mpho.
Yes, I'm saying I think the prisoners for what the Afriforum has done, whether the court judges it differently, but for them to go severely damage the country's image, it's just not right. And to be all honest, they know they've benefited. I mean, over the years, the land issue has not been resolved, and they still are big beneficiaries of the land of this country. But for them to just walk out and go and lie about South Africa, it's just not on. Actual fact, I wish that they can pack and go because they at least have a refugee. We have no country, we only have this one. They have opportunity to go somewhere, they can go. They must pack and go.
Mpa, thank you so much for calling in. We'll take more calls. As you can imagine, this is a very emotive discussion. Gabriel, I want to bring you in here. Mr. Manyi talked about the Riotous Assemblies Act of 1956 in a third section of that reads instigating foreign intervention in internal affairs with intentions to harm the state, and that being the grounds with which they can argue treason. Your legal mind, what do you hear?
I hear a replay, firstly, of the bad old days of apartheid. The Riotous Assembly Act was invoked in the treason trial. I mean, it was one of the most egregious attempts to limit political expression back in the day. Much of it was repealed even during apartheid because it was so bad. Furthermore, the Constitutional Court much more recently has limited the Assemblies Act reading to protect speech in relation to the EFF, actually, against whom it had been attempted to be used. So I think that they're walking into a brick wall there if they think that the courts are going to uphold this. But I think that, it's really important to be realistic about the fact that, firstly, there's no serious evidence that the US misimpression about land already having been confiscated comes from Afriforum. It might have come from elsewhere. It might be misspeaking. On the other hand, there should be no doubt about the fact that part of the blame in the situation has to go to the doorstep of the present government, in particular the ANC. Expropriation without compensation on an open-ended list. There's two things that no one really talks about. Firstly, the list is open-ended and it can be used against people of any race. And secondly, one of the special mentions in the list is not abandoned land, but land that is securely held as an investment. It's not being used. It's being held primarily for the purpose of making a profit. It's very disturbing to any investor to hear that in a country with 8 million unemployed people. That's a big problem. It's also very unclear how that's supposed to be fitting in with the Constitution. So when the Americans see this, when the Brits see this, when the Japanese see this, they see, wow, you guys have changed the rules to allow the government to take away property merely for the reason that someone is hoping to make a profit out of reselling it, which is what happens everywhere in the world. It is clearly the case that part of the blame has to go to the South African government. And so I just want to make it clear that, the US didn't improve the situation by singling out Afrikaners, but the US didn't pass the Expropriation Act that threatens the property rights of Black South Africans, white South Africans. And I single out Black South Africans because Black people own most land by value, it seems, according to evidence gathered by Stats SA. So Black South Africans have the most to lose if the property rights system is undermined. I think as South Africans, we should be standing together. We should be seeking together to support efforts to strike down the Expropriation Act and to say to the Americans, back off. This is not really about you. It's about us. We need to fix our own house, and we can do so. Pay attention to it. That's great, but don't be careful with what you say and do.
Gabriel, help me.
And let our courts decide. Our courts, I think, are going to decide in favor of the free speech here and against the act. And I think that's important to know.
Will you just clarify for me what you mean by Black land ownership by value? Because, and you're talking about Stats SA's data here, and if I remember correctly, the data are actually speaking to, I think it's something like 70% of our land in white hands. So explain what you mean by value. Clarify that for me.
Sure. So that figure that 70% of land in South Africa is owned by white people came from a survey back in 2017, in which only 1/3 of the land surveyed was individually classified. So of that 1/3, 70% was held by white people. So that's 1/5 of all of the land. Another third, roughly speaking, is owned by the government, and another third is owned by community property associations, trusts, and the like. and was not racially classified. So that unfortunately created this huge misimpression that went around the country. The most valuable land in South Africa is urban land. And what Stats SA does is it asks people, do you own a home? And is that home in this category or that category or that category? And the highest category is above 3 million rand. If you own a 3 million rand house, that clearly puts you in a comfortable middle-class position. And our sort of correspondence with various property analysts indicates that that's where the bulk of the land value lies. And a minority of 3 million rand plus homes are owned by white people. So the bulk is owned by black people. And those, all of that property falls under the same definition of land as farms, and is exposed to the threats of this property rights violation.
Okay, I see what you've done there. Do you want to respond to that, Advocate Morota? Because he essentially talks, and that's how he explains black ownership by value, right? And going back to data that goes all the way back to 2017, and it's a lot to hear. But what you make of it? You've got the Democratic Alliance, for instance, filing papers with the High Court to challenge the act in and of itself. So while we're all heading to court, we're still butting heads over whether or not the act needs to be in place, while we're also arguing treason or not for Afriforum. So it's a lot that we're actually debating here, and all of it leaning so much on each other.
Yeah, Naleji, talking about the Democratic Alliance challenging the act in court. Actually, I was talking with our head of legal division in the Black Forum. We are going to make an application to be amicus in that case so that we assist the court to arrive at an appropriate decision as far as that case is concerned. But over and above that, what the gentleman is saying, Naleji, she must state the facts. The Expropriation Act is actually, we were very angry with the government. Why don't you do expropriation without compensation? This is a expropriation with act, expropriation light. We don't want expropriation light.
With determination of value.
Yes, but what I want to say is that what he must understand is that, the apartheid government, the settler colonialism project, they designed the laws within this country. Your 1918 Land Act, your Groups Areas Act, to put together the wealth and the land and everything of this country and channel it and give it, donate it, bequeath it to the black people. And while black people, hands are held at the back, buried their heads in the sand, and the current Afriforum and white people who are in this country, they are the beneficiaries of that system. So our government is saying, let's, in the spirit and purport of the Constitution, let's promulgate the law which is going to redress the injustices of the past. What are the injustices of the past? The exclusion of black people, the dispossession of the land from black people, so forth and so on. So it's what the government is trying to do in the spirit of the Constitution. So to coin it that the government we must apportion a blame to government because of the act, I think is not a truthful reflection. As the gentleman is saying, I believe strongly that the government is acting within the boundaries of our Constitution.
All right, let's take more calls. Thabiso is on the line in Volksrust. Thabiso, good evening. Thanks for calling.
Good evening and good evening to your viewers. I think my view is very clear. Afriforum should face for their action. Because what they have done is they've caused a panic. They've sent an impression that South African government is slaughtering and murdering the white people in particular and taking their land away from them. And that has indeed harmed the country, because investors, if they were to see this as they're seeing it now, it will cause a slow and a flag in it, and they should face it. I also want to disagree with the notion that should be put in the ANC government. Remember, The expropriation of land, it might have started in the ANC conference, but that resolution was taken back to the ordinary citizen to comment, and the majority of South African citizens were in support that land should be expropriated without compensation, because this is a stolen land to begin with. And therefore, we are correcting the past injustices that has happened in particular the black individuals, and people should face the music. Thank you.
Thabiso, thank you so much for calling. Peggy's on the line in Sebokeng. Peggy, good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
I'm well, sir. Talk to us.
Yeah, no, look, what MK has done is very good. Look, it can't be that the African minority want to hold everything. They know that they are holding land that was stolen, whereby many black people do not have land. What do we do to correct that? We must legislate. Now, they are refusing that. They are against the NHI. They are against the Belapin that's supposed to transform education, NHI transform healthcare. Now, with the land, they are refusing. What must we do? If we take the route of Zimbabwe, they will complain. I mean, what else must we do? If we act within the law, then they are complaining. No, they must be charged, and black people must stand together now and see these groups for what they are. I'm also amazed by that fellow for race relations. I know that he's still working with the DA, but he's leaving this Afriforum free. He says they are not guilty. The guilty party is government. The very same government that we black people are complaining that is not taking action in terms of redressing the land issue and other issues.
Okay. Peggy, thank you so much for calling. Gabriel, I'll give you a moment to respond a little bit later on, but there's a lot for us to look at here. Mr. Manyi, I want to bring you in because you mentioned the Riotous Assemblies Act, and, Gabriel, in response, made such an interesting point because it's so emotive for us. This is legislation that was used in the treason trial that saw even the arrest of former President Nelson Mandela. Let's talk a little bit about whether or not we're concerned about, using the same wording that was used back then on South African struggle leaders. We'll get to that on the other side of this. Welcome back. We continue on this issue of the MK party having filed treason charges against Afriforum just today. And we continue with our panel taking calls on 0105946010. Do you support the move by the MK party and other bodies like the Black Forum of South Africa, represented here in studio, that believes that this is the direction to go? This is after funding cuts from the US to South Africa as a result, or on the back of, rather, let's say on the back of the signing of the Land Expropriation Act. And one of the things that we've talked about is the laws and legislation that you then use. Mr. Manyi, you then talked about the Riotous Assemblies Act, and Gabriel says this is the same legislation we used in the treason trial in the 50s. What do you say to that?
Naledi?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, okay, a couple of things. Firstly, I think your guest there that I'm responding to now is misleading himself. In the first instance, all the laws, apartheid laws, there was no fail swoop repealing of those laws. Those laws are still applicable even today. So there's a piecemeal approach that Parliament has taken to deal with these laws. But as we sit here now, that act is still there in that same wording as it were. It talks about the limitation of that act. There's no such a thing. It was just a proper interpretation. In the case of Malema, or rather EFF, Malema was very clear there that the issue about the Wulibunu and all of that, nobody, or kill the poor, kill the farmer situation, nobody as a result of that chant went on a rampage to go and kill anybody, which just shows that it was just a chant. There was no ill intent to do any harm to anyone, and no harm was done to anyone as a result of that. And that song did not incite anyone as it was. So that's the interpretation that the court gave. So there was no limitation. It was just a proper explanation. What's different here is that with what the Afriforum has said, with all their lies, there has been a direct reaction. There's been consequences of what they have said. And the consequences are a litany of the executive orders that Trump has signed that have now got that are harming their country, as explained before. So this is fundamental difference. That's the first point. Secondly, very quickly, I think it's important that we reflect on that 2017, what he calls a survey. So what was a survey? It was an audit, the difference. When you audit, typically audits will take a sample. So if you have a clean audit, it means the sample that you've taken pretty much represents that you've got your story correct. Even if you get an unqualified auditor, it's also a level of correctness or cleanliness or accountability in what was being audited, as it were. So the land audit that he makes reference to and tries to trivialize, it was very important, that land audit of 2017, which shows that Africans have like 4% of the land and all of that. So that is the situation that we have. And because it was an audit, it was a sample, and that is a representative of the country. Go anywhere in the country. This thing that is talking about some academic ownership of sorts, that's not what we're talking about here. We want to learn in the true sense of the word, not some hypothetical academic sense. I think let me close by saying that it is a pity that we're discussing this thing as if we're discussing the real thing. Your other guests, they talked about expropriation light. It's not even expropriation anything, this thing. There was no need for what is currently in place. There is nothing that this piece of legislation is going to do to help anybody do that which they could not do before. Remember that there are two tenets which this law is based on, is to ensure that government is able to expropriate land for public purpose and is also going to be able to expropriate land in the public interest. Now, those two categories of expropriation have already been at play without this useless legislation. I don't even know what people are challenging with this thing.
Okay.
Because even the no compensation is not existent in this law.
All right.
It's I need to
step in.
Nil compensation.
Yeah, I need to step in.
Sorry?
I need to step in, Mzwanele. Thank you so much for your contribution this evening. We really have appreciated it. In the interest of time, Mpumelelo, I know you're listening, and I want to let you have the final voice, so please be patient with us. Gabriel, your final thoughts, and as you think about really where we should close this conversation off, I really want us to think about the language that we're starting to use more and more in the past few weeks as a country. I mean, you've got people that are saying, let them go. This is how South Africans are speaking to other South Africans. We're using words like treason. So let's talk about, is there a way that we could bring the temperature down?
Yeah, I think there is. I think it's crucial to look at the polling commissioned by the Institute of Race Relations, which shows the overwhelming majority of Black, white, Indian, and coloured South Africans are very eager to stay together, to work together, and to grow this country together. There's a small minority on all fronts who think it would be better to go it alone. There's the EFF types, the MK types, the Orania types, etc. But the vast majority want to stick it together and know that our fates are bound together. I think just on this panel, on this discussion, the biggest misimpression that was sometimes coming through, just to dispel, is that the nil compensation clause of the Expropriation Act can only be used against white people, and so therefore it's okay. Firstly, it shouldn't be used against anyone. And secondly, it can be used against everyone. There is no racial classification in the nil compensation clause. It says if your land is unused and you're trying to sell it for a profit, then you can have your land taken away. It also says there's other circumstances not included in the list. We can take your land away. And that can be used against Black people, against coloured people, against Indian people, and against white people. If we are going to grow this country, it is going to be together by getting resistance to defend our human rights in a civil way, and to get economic policy that drives investment, growth, collaboration, trade, fostering goodwill, and so on. To really resurrect the rainbow. That's what the GNU is supposed to do. It's failing in a lot of respects, but it's what we as ordinary South Africans have to do, and mainly do on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. Where people are given the chance, they collaborate.
Okay, Gabriel, we really appreciate your time. Gabriel Crouse there is with IRR. He's the Executive Director of IRR Legal, speaking to us. Mpumelelo, I mean, there's been a lot that's been said. We've even looked at legislation that goes all the way back to 1956 that, the MK party says that's what they're going to be arguing as they move forward. I mean, you can talk to us about that response, but if we see, parties like Black Forum SA saying that they're going to be joining in on the matter that the DA is taking up to help the court, I mean, it certainly says that you might have quite a lot of legal movement in the weeks or months to come over this very act, and also what has come out of announcements by the US. What do you foresee legally?
Definitely. Well, I think one thing that you can arrive at is to say people, whenever they're in trouble or they can't see eye to eye, they always run back to the law and always run back to the courts in terms of what the courts are saying. Now, it poses a question and challenge to the people that are in the legislature to say, create laws that are responsive to the type of situations and to the type of issues that you are facing. Situations are going to be developed for this. For example, when the Routers Act was being developed and when the common law crime of high treason was being developed, there was no Twitter then. With the intervention of social media, it's going to create new issues and new problems. Make sure that you're able to deal with them as you move along. Second part, make sure that those people that are passing the laws are well equipped in terms of all the issues that they need to deal with and all the eventualities that will need to be there. And you need to be very clear in terms of protecting what type of harm you're seeking to protect. Very important, when you go to court in a criminal matter, you must be able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that the individual that you are talking to or that you are accusing them is guilty. Now, read all those two pieces of legislation that were passed before the constitutional dispensation. Look into them with the current constitution and the freedom of speech. You may have a very difficult task in being able to prove that the person is indeed guilty beyond reasonable doubt, but there is a room for improvement. Make sure that you develop those laws which are supposed to protect us and the sovereignty of South Africa, so that if you want to use them at a later stage to get some sort of justice, it is easier to do so.
Yeah, all right. Advocate Morota, the moment, yes. What do we take from this moment as a country?
What we take from this moment, Naleji, the Afriforum chaps must be arrested. A case of crime has been opened. The police must do their work. They must arrest them like any other criminal or a suspect of crime in this country. That's when we'll realize, that when we will be applying the law the way it is applied, or even on the grassroots levels in this country. But the point that Nigeria want to come to is that we see a lot of white people rejecting the offer from Donald Trump. And we realize that the refusal to agree to the order is that they are enjoying the white privilege in the country. They know that if they go to America, they'll be second-class citizens, they'll be working at the KFCs there in America, while here in South Africa, their white privilege is still well protected. So we are encouraging all of them. We're even having a debate that it is wrong to refer to this group of people as Afrikaners, because they are not Afrikaners, we are Afrikaners. They are European South African citizens, and we must call them that because they are exactly that. So as Black Forum, we are saying from now going forward, tomorrow actually, we are going to write to the authorities, National Commissioner of Police, to effect an arrest of the Afrikaners guys, so that
of the Afrikaners,
of the Afriforum leaders,
okay.
So that so that the normal criminal processes could ensue from that action of arrest.
All right. This is an unending discussion and a debate that I think can go on certainly for weeks. And that's one of the beauties of our country, is we certainly are outspoken as a country. So feel free to keep the WhatsApps coming in, 072-110-5584. How is it that South Africa finds itself or can get itself out of this quandary? We'll continue looking at those WhatsApps throughout the evening. Thanks so much to my guests. We had earlier Mzwanele Manyi, who's Chief Whip of the Mkhonto weSizwe Party, Advocate Kgagudi Morota, who is the CEO of the Black Forum of South Africa, Mpumelelo Zikalala, legal expert, Gabriel Crouse, Executive Director of IRR Legal with the Institute for Race Relations. Let's take a short break. We've got more news on the other side of this.